Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Arthur Brooks, President of the American Enterprise Institute, and it's my honor to welcome you to this event commemorating the Tiananmen tragedy 25 years ago today. We'll be joined by lawyer and activist Chen Guangcheng, and his remarks will follow a brief introduction by me, followed by questions and answers hosted by me, and then we'll turn it over to the audience a little bit later. It's actually a little startling to recognize that it's already been 25 years that have passed since the protest unfolded on Tiananmen Square in Beijing and in cities throughout China. It's even harder to believe that while there are numerous events to commemorate this day across the United States, there is not even one single public remembrance in all of China of what happened in Tiananmen Square. The public memory of these events has been forcefully expunged from the People's Republic, and the question has to be asked today: did the students in Tiananmen Square act in vain? The fact that we're here today marking the anniversary after 25 years, the fact that Chen Guangcheng and others like him carry on the students' case, suggests that the protesters of 1989 were actually, in a strange way, successful. They lit a fuse, a long fuse to be sure, but one that the Chinese authorities have been unable to extinguish. It's a tragic reality that the Chinese authorities did not learn the true lessons from Tiananmen. The idea that Chinese citizens would sacrifice their liberty for an improved standard of living will ultimately prove to be a mistake. That is our belief in the United States. The underlying causes of the Tiananmen protests have not been resolved and continue to undergird many of the social challenges that China faces today. Our speaker today, Chen Guangcheng, is one of China's many activists that have recognized the truth of these words. Before giving him the microphone, I want to tell you a little bit about his story. Chen Guangcheng is a Chinese civil rights lawyer and activist who's been a persistent voice for freedom, for human dignity, for the rule of law in his native China. He has been blind since childhood and is self-taught in the law. He's best known for exposing abuses in official family planning practices in China, often involving claims of violence and forced abortion. Chen first petitioned the Chinese government in 1996 to redress a tax issue in which he was levied taxes, or he was on his family, and according to Chinese law, he is exempt from those taxes. He was entitled to be exempted, and he succeeded in his case, and soon after became an advocate for the rights of the disabled in poor and rural communities in China. Following this, between 1997 and 2004, Mr. Chen worked on behalf of residents in his village to bring cases of toxic waste dumping and illegal government land seizure before the central Chinese regime. In 2005, he gained international recognition for organizing a landmark class action lawsuit against the authorities in Shandong province for the excessive enforcement of the one-child policy. Beijing rejected his suit and barred him from continuing his work, but activists secured and published his findings online. As you might expect, this had great repercussions. As a result of this, he was placed under house arrest from September of 2005 to March of 2006 and was formally arrested shortly thereafter. He served his full sentence of 4 years and was released in 2010, but remained under house arrest as a risk to the state. In April of 2012, he fled and sought asylum at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. The U.S. government negotiated to allow his safe passage to the U.S. to further his studies. New York University granted him a position as a visiting scholar, where he went and was joined by his family a few days later. He spent about a year at NYU, but parted ways with New York University after he stated that the university was too heavily influenced by Beijing. In October of 2013, he accepted a position at the Witherspoon Institute, an independent research center that works to enhance public understanding of freedom and the moral foundations of a democratic society. He's a distinguished fellow today in human rights at the William E. and Carol G. Simon Center on Religion and the Constitution. He's also a member of the faculty of the Institute for Policy Research and Catholic Studies at the Catholic University of America, and a distinguished senior advisor to the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. It is my great honor to welcome Mr. Chen Guangcheng.
Thank you, Professor Brooks, for that one introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. Today is the first time I have spoken in public in English. I hope my thoughts and words are clear to you. Thank you. Thank you. 25 years ago today, a great evil was done by those in power in China. They killed hundreds of their own people to silence them. They have tried to silence me, but I will not be silent. I want to speak to you today in English, so no one will forget that terrible day. I was 17 years old. Being blind, I could not attend school. If I had been a student, I too might have been at Tiananmen Square that day. But I was not there. I had only the radio and the TV. But here's what I remember. I remember Li Peng. Li Peng came out to talk with the students. He avoided the important questions. I remember a student walked up to him as he was speaking and gave him a note. After Li Peng finished speaking, the same student said, "Sir, I just give you a note to tell you that I'll interrupt you if you don't address our questions." I'm not sure who that student was. From my memory of his voice, it was Wang Dan or Wu Kaixi, though I can't be sure. You remember 1978, just before the new democracy in China. Deng Xiaoping proposed to, quote, allow some people to get rich first, end quote. Who got first rich? Party and government officials and their families, of course. What followed? Corruption and profiteering. But students and ordinary Chinese people wanted not just economic reform. They wanted political reform too. But officials in favor of reform were suppressed by officials with a vested interest in opposing it. You remember Hu Yaobang, reformist leader Hu Yaobang was forced to resign and he suddenly died on April 15 that year. Students gathered all over China to express their reverence for him. They gathered to mourn his death and to spread his views. They put up posters and express their deep concerns about media freedom, democracy, and to protest corruption. People gathered at the monument to people's heroes in Tiananmen Square to mourn Hu Yaobang. Students gave speeches in the square. What did they want? They wanted their human rights. But Deng Xiaoping and Li Peng were afraid. Deng Xiaoping and Li Peng wanted to silence them. At the end of April, the People's Daily condemned the students' peaceful and lawful activities as a riot. This brought out more students to march and protest. You remember Zhao Ziyang? Zhao Ziyang in early May said that the people's demands were valid. He admitted this was patriotic movement and agreed to dialogue with students. But many did not trust him, and a hunger strike began on May 13, when Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was to visit China. Students from all over China went to Beijing to join the hunger strike. In more than 400 cities across China, people from all walks of life expressed their support of the students. Although Li Peng finally came out to dialogue with students, he showed no sincerity. Instead, he deferred to their lawful demands. On May 19, Zhao Ziyang called on students to stop their hunger strike, telling them to live healthy. But he had known for several days that the party hardliners planned a crackdown on students. This was the last time Zhao was seen in public. On May 20th, the Communist Party declared martial law. Troops were sent to Beijing, but hundreds of people blocked them. On June 1st, Li Peng called the movement a riot and said that Tiananmen Square must be cleared. From the evening of June 3rd to the dawn of June 4th, the communist government massacred its own people. Soldiers marched in, tanks roared in. Many students and city residents were killed. especially at Muxidi and in Tiananmen Square. Protests in other cities were also cruelly put down. 25 years have passed since the massacre at Tiananmen Square, June 4th, 1989. That patriotic movement 25 years ago was by students and ordinary citizens. They wanted democracy and freedom. They opposed government corruption. The movement lasted just 50 days. It was suppressed by the Chinese Communist government. Many young people died. Many fled the country. 25 years have passed, but instead of admitting their evils, instead of facing history, the Communist Party of China continues to cover it all up and continues its one-party dictatorship. Calls for justice have still not been heard. The criminals who ordered the crackdown have still not been held accountable. This is a deep grief for the Chinese people. This is a grief for the whole world. Today, we see great economic progress in China, but there has been very little political reform. The Communist Party of China, the CPC, continues to block media, continues to filter so-called sensitive words on the internet. In public, people are still afraid and silent about the June 4th incident. In the past 25 years, the Chinese people have fought like heroes against the tanks, machine guns, police batons and shields, handcuffs, foot shackles, and prison cells. They have had little success. Why? Because they fight against cold-blooded evil men who live outside the law, outlaws. But citizens' activism has been growing. Who are those brave people? Heroes who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. Heroes in the Democracy Party of China. Human rights lawyers. Heroes involved in more than 200,000 citizens each year. Opposing this act of patriotism costs China about 70 billion yuan each year, about 11.7 billion US dollars. China spends this hate side, not on looking after her people, but in suppressing them for speaking out against those great crimes of the Communist Party. I have spent many years in prison. When my sentence was up, I was again detained. I was put under house arrest in Dongshigu village, my hometown. All my visitors were beaten or driven away. There are many other examples for the government's cruel opposition to freedom of thought or speech. Let's talk about just one of many, the Jiansanjiang incident. Perhaps you thought that the, quote, re-education through forced labor system, end quote, was abolished in mainland China. But did you know that black Jews still exist throughout the country? These are where Falun Gong practitioners, human rights activists, petitioners, and political dissidents are illegally detained. The Heilongjiang Nongken Grove is just one such place. On March 20th of this year, 4 human rights lawyers went there to help their illegally detained clients. These lawyers were Jiang Tianyong, Tang Jitian, Zhang Junjie, and Wang Chen. National security protection agents and people from the 610 office detained them and brutally tortured them. When they heard about this, many ordinary Chinese from all walks of life and from all over the country went to Jiansanjiang to support the 4 lawyers. They were also jailed, beaten, deported, or placed under house arrest. But their support worked. The government released the lawyers after 15 days. The lawyers reported being hung in the air and tortured. They were threatened with organ harvesting and being buried alive. Between them, they suffered 24 broken ribs. When they were taken to the hospital, national security protection agents antagonized them and inhibited their medical care. A government that cannot face its own history is a government without a future. While a government that cannot treat with treat its people with kindness, treat other countries any better? I think not. Hong Kong's June 4th Memorial Museum opens this year. It is the first museum in the world dedicated to June 4th. It reveals the truth of what happened. Truth that people in mainland China are not allowed to hurt, and the Taiwan Association for Human Rights stated an anti-CPC movement on the internet. The museum, the internet movement, everything that makes us remember June 4th, 1989, has its effect. Every speech, every story on the radio or TV, every candlelight video makes the perpetrators shudder in fear. It gives people courage to think and speak aloud again. Thank you to the people of Hong Kong. Thank you to everyone in the world who loves freedom and democracy and speaks thought. For 25 years, you have refused to bury history. You continue to pursue the truth. You honor the martyrs who died June 4th. Today, many Chinese people are beginning to awake. They were overcoming their fear and working for democracy. Chinese will change, but we must stop the Communist Party from brutalizing and suppressing the China people during this inevitable change. Today, on this 25th anniversary of the June 4th incident, I speak to the people and government of the United States. I speak to all freedom-loving countries throughout the world. I hope you will look beyond China's economic success. I urge you to support the ordinary Chinese. Help them end internet censorship. Help them break down the great firewall of China. Stop receiving the June 4th incident criminals as your honored guests. Don't let those who crush human rights enter your free, democratic countries. Deny them the warmth of your handshake, the warmth of your smile. Evildoers won't stop until they are held responsible. Dishonoring evildoers is not dishonorable, but honoring them honors their crimes. A corrupt regime is a threat to us, not just economically and militarily, but is a threat to our very human culture, our human civilization, and our universal human values. To give future generations a free world, we must act now. Work with the human rights lawyers in China. Help the internet activists. Partner with all statesmen who support democracy and freedom. Let us join hands and fight together, here, now. At the rebirth of democracy in China. The whole world must stand firm. If we speak loudly and clearly, a free China, a democratic China, a China where a constitutional government will come to pass. It must. It must. Dear friends, thank you. 谢谢大家 ，Thank you， 谢谢，谢谢大家，谢谢。
To begin with, thank you for your work and your courage.
首先，我要感谢您的勇气，还有你所做的工作。
大家共同努力。
What is the work of everyone?
And that leads to my first question, Mr. Chen. There are people here who have spent time in China, and there are people here who've never been to China. But all of us in the United States want to help you, and they want to help the Chinese people. The U.S. government can do a lot, and you've talked about policy that's important, most notably not to honor people who are undertaking bad policies. But my question is a little different. How can each one of us as a private citizen work in our private lives to help your cause?
首先呢，我就要问您的第一个这个问题。我们在场的各位呢，有些人呢曾经去过中国，有些人呢从来没有去过中国，但是呢都想要帮助您，还有在中国的每一个人。所以我现在想问的就是，您刚才有提到了，在美国政府的话，他采取很多的政策，但是呢，我今天不是要讲这些政策，我现在想要问您的就是呢，每一个人，每一个个人，我们可以用我们什么个人的力量来帮助您达到您的工作？
我想其实每一个人的力量都是非常非常强大的。我想呢，在座的各位每一个人的力量都比我要做起事情来方便的很多。我们应该相信呢，实际上通过现在的信息技术以及通过现在的各方面的力量，我们推动一个独裁者进入历史是非常非常有可能的。大家对这方面感兴趣，我非常的高兴。如果大家有什么具体想法，我们可以加深交流。
I think every individual is very powerful. I think for every one of us here, I think when you want to do something, you probably it's more convenient than I do it. Because this is the age of technology, and there are a lot of things that we can do it to push all those dictators into history.
The Chinese young people who are dissidents are using technology more every day, and we see many cases, for example, the use of code words, of satire and technology. Are the Chinese officials aware of this, and are they able to keep ahead in trying to suppress these efforts from young people?
我们现在看到很多呢，在中国很多那些年轻的异议人士的话呢，他们很多人都是上网了。他们网上的时候呢，他们很多时候又会用一些很讽刺的一些字眼之类的这种话。当然，这个中国政府的话呢，有办法压制上面这种的用法吗？
这种网络上的这种博弈呢，实际上是由来已久了，差不多10年了。实际上，从08年的中共想办法要在每一个人的电脑上安装一个绿霸，就能看得出来，他在这个网络上与人民的这场战争呢，实际上是处于一种不利的地位。他仍然想利用他手中所独揽的这种专权来封人民的口，可是这一切都是徒劳的。总的来讲，到目前为止，我们看到呢，任何的一个信息、一个公共事件，你中共想把它封锁住，已经不可能了，最多也就是让它的影响能够降低一点。如果大家能够在这方面再努力一把的话，恐怕想降低影响的这种可能性也会适得其反。
I think that this has been going on for more than 10 years already. Ever since back in 2008, the Chinese government wanted to install green dam on every computer, and that was not very successful. And so that has, the Chinese government has been under a very disadvantageous kind of position when they want to fight the people. They want to grasp on the power, but it's impossible. For everything that happens in China that will be spread around, it's impossible to block everything now, that people will know about it.
In 1989, the Chinese Communist Party made an argument against the U.S., which was pressuring it to respect civil rights and human rights. And the argument from the Chinese Communist Party was that the economic agenda was more important than civil rights, and that countries that were in an early stage of economic development couldn't afford the luxury of guaranteeing equal and universal human rights. Does the Communist Party still believe this, and do the Chinese people believe this argument?
在1989年的时候，当中共他跟在美国在讲有关于1989年的事情的时候，他的一个辩论方法，他说，因为那时候美国呢要一直呼吁呢中国呢必须要尊重人权，尊重这个民权。那当时候呢这个中国政权的话呢，他们的理由呢，他们辩论理由就是呢，中国现在正在进行呢经济上面的议程，经济发展上面的议程，这个重要性大过于发展人权。那所以呢，他们为了要经济上面的问题的话，对于呢这个全面的人权呢，还有公平的人权的话，他们呢觉得这应该要先摆在一边。您认为呢？现在还是这个样子吗？中国的人民怎么想？
我觉得混淆了一个概念，这个人权不需要发展。现在在人权问题上，中共只要停止迫害就够了。实际上，迫害中国人权的罪魁祸首就是中共。他什么去发展人权？他只要不打压，中国的人权就会不知好多少倍。他只要不所做的一切都是为了他自己的专权去着想，他为人民分出一点想法来，那么中国的人权也会好很多。他有钱投7000多亿元人民币来镇压人民，他无钱去投到教育当中来教育老百姓，他也无钱去投入到残疾人事业当中、社会公益事业当中。
As far as I'm concerned, the human rights, you don't have to develop human rights. Now, all the Chinese government have to do is stop persecuting people, as As soon as they stop persecuting people, that the human rights situation in China will be improved. And what they do is they don't have to think about they want to grasp on their power. All they need to do is they think more for their people, and then there will be people who enjoy better human rights in China. Nowadays, that the Chinese government spent 70 billion renminbi on suppressing all those activities, but it didn't use the money on education or use that money for any activities that will help the public interest. What they need to do is they need to spend the money there instead of suppressing people.
对，这个镇压人民，把人民视为头号敌人的，可能全世界也只有中共了。中国是一个非常好的国家，那么中国政府现在被中共给挟持、被绑架着，完全不能发挥它正常的作用，沦为中共控制人民的一个工具。所以说，我们觉得应该认清楚根源在哪。
Now the Communist Party, they treat people as their number one enemy. This is the only country in the world that would treat their own people as their number one enemy. China is a good country, it's a great country. But the thing is that the CCP, Communist Party, is not hostaging, they're taking the Chinese government as hostage and then try to control the power.
经济发展了，人权并没有改善，反过来利用他们手里有钱了来糟蹋老百姓。那么仅用来软禁我一家人的花的钱就超过7000多万元。那么你中共这钱是你的党费吗？你不是拿国库里的钱来做的这邪恶吗？你有什么理由来说经济比人权重要？
But now the economy has developed. We have taken off economically, but the human rights situation hasn't been improved. They have spent so much money on attacking their own people. For example, in my own case, I've been house arrested. They spent more than 700,000 renminbi just to deal with my house arrest. Whose money that is? It belongs to the party. So those are the evil doing of the government.
You have worked for many years on the one-child policy in China. You've protested and you've exposed the abuses of forced sterilization and forced abortion. And last fall, Beijing announced a relaxation of the one-child policy. Is it your view that the one-child policy is going to be a thing of the past? What is the future of China's one-child policy?
那您呢，一直呢都在为呢中国的这个一胎化政策上面呢做很多努力，要打击这一胎化政策。你做了很多的示威的工作，做了很多这样的一方面的工作，希望能够改变这个强制堕胎啦，或是强制节育的这样一个情况。那现在呢，中国政府呢宣布了，它将要放松呢一胎化政策的这样的一个执行。您认为呢，这一胎化政策的话呢，现在就要走进历史了吗？
我觉得。一胎化政策之所以难解决，根源就是这个政策已经成了部分中共官员敛财的一个手段了。实际上，现在给社会造成问题的这个一胎化政策，比人口众多所带来的问题更大。
As far as I'm concerned, I think this one-child policy has become a financial means for some of the government officials to gain some interest, and I think this policy has done more harm to the Chinese people and to China more than the population has done to China.
对，现在这个社会的老龄化、劳工缺乏等一系列的问题都已经表现出来。这些问题实际上它的潜在危害比多出那些人要严重的多。要按人数的密度来说，中国的人口密度比日本小得多。那日本都没有造成这么大的问题，你这儿会有这么大问题吗？这显然就是危言耸听。
Now we can see that now we have facing the problem of the aging society and also the labor shortage, and those are the issues that caused by the one-child policy. And so you can see that the density, the population density in Japan is actually not as much is more serious than that in China. But however, they don't have a one-child policy. We do have a one-child policy.
这个政策的存在对中国的损伤，对让中国人民不再尊重生命。对于这个杀人偿命这种传统的东西呢，已经弄得非常非常淡薄了。他们认为只要当权者说杀人，那没罪就是没罪，谁也没办法。这是非常非常危险的一个举动。而且我也觉得和其他的人权问题一样，任何一个中 共独裁者对人民的迫害，这种侵权现象，都不要指望他善心大发啊，全靠人民的努力来让他停止这种迫害人权的行动。
I think it's because of this policy that people in China no longer respect life. When the government says that somebody has to be executed, then they will be executed. People wouldn't say anything about it.
Recently, the new President Xi Jinping has talked about the Chinese dream and the reforms that can improve the country. One of the things that he's done is a really successful crackdown on corruption. Many people believe this is a victory for ordinary Chinese citizens. Are you optimistic about the future under Xi Jinping? Do you think that the next few years could see real improvements to your country?
那习主席上任以来呢，他呢大谈了中国梦，也对中国呢做出一些的改革。他现在呢正在大幅的这个打击这个腐败贪污的情况。那很多人认为呢，这是对老百姓来讲是一个胜利。你觉得呢，在未来的几年里面的话呢，中国真的会这方面的话会有所改进吗？
我觉得在打击腐败这方面呢，已经到了没有办法做的时候了。因为按照中国现行刑法的规定，就说5000元就够刑事立案送进监狱的话，我相信中共的干部从中央到地方，可能剩不下几个。
As far as I'm concerned, I think the crackdown on the corruption is not going to be that effective because it's too prevalent. Now, according to the criminal laws of China, as long as that person that be taken a bribery of $5,000, they will have to be put in jail. And if that's the case, is that I don't think anybody is clean, so-called, and in Chinese society.
我觉得现在他所做的一切，无非只有一个目的，就是延长中共的专制统治。我们丝毫看不出来。他真正所有为这个社会变得更好去着想，为了这个国家变得更好去着想，为了人民能有更好的生活去着想。他在打击腐败的同时，也加大了对民众要求社会公正的这些民众的打击力度，也是空前的。所以我们对此我觉得不应该抱太大的希望。真正中国的希望就在中国人民的觉醒，就在这中国人民结束这种专权统治。实行民主制度。
I think that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do is to extend their totalitarian control of the country. They are not thinking the better of the society, not thinking to better the life of the people. They are not thinking that at all. They are thinking about how they can extend their power. That's all. That's what they need to do. And while they are attacking, cracking down all those corruptions, they are also taking the unprecedented string of attacking their own people. The hope of China is not lies in the government. Its alliance lies in awakening of the people, lies in awakening of the people, putting this government away.
I'm going to ask my last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. So please get your questions ready, and we'll call on you in a moment. My last question is this. Mr. Chen, what do you think the People's Republic of China will look like in 20 years? What's your view of what we are likely to experience from your country 2 decades from now?
那我现在要问我的最后一个问题。那在我问完最后一个问题之后呢，我就把这开放给大家来提出问题来。那陈先，我想要问的就是呢，中华人民共和国在未来20年的时候，您觉得它会是什么的一个样子？也就是在过20年之后，你觉得中国会是什么样子呢？
这个呢，当然取决于很多因素，也取决于我们大家努力的程度。当然，我们最理想的一种状态是现在台湾的样子。
Well, this depends how much efforts we put in. The most ideal situation is like in Taiwan.
We're going to go to the audience now. Before we do, I want to remind you that Mr. Chen's remarks will be published very shortly on the website, publicdiscourse.org.com or .org? Okay, thepublicdiscourse.com, which is a part of the Witherspoon Institute. So you'll be able to find all of his remarks in published form if you go to that website. That is, again, thepublicdiscourse.org. Taiwan.com for all of you in the audience and those of us who are watching us on the internet. Now, as we go to the audience, please raise your hand and I'll call on you and wait for a microphone. When a microphone reaches you, I'd appreciate it if you'd tell us your name and the affiliation that you have with your organization. So who would like to start? Who would like to start? The mic will come right here to begin with. First, your name.
Hi, Mr. Chen. My name is Garrett Van der Wees. I'm editor of Taiwan Communique. Thank you very much for your very moving words. Our publication is focused on human rights and democracy in Taiwan. But my question to you is, what are your views on the lessons of Tiananmen for Taiwan? Last year, you visited Taiwan, but there was a hesitancy on the part of the government to meet with you and to talk with you even. Why is that? Shouldn't they be very much more supportive of human rights in China from the Taiwan side?
您好，我叫 Gary， 我是来自台湾公报这份刊物的。我们这份公报里面的话呢，我们最主要是有关于报道有关于台湾在人权方面，还有台湾在民主上面的这些进展。那我想要请问教您的就是呢，您在这天安门的这样的一个整个得到了一个经验的时候呢，有什么经验的话可以给台湾他们来做借鉴的。我知道您去年的时候呢也访问了台湾，但是呢那时候呢台湾的政府呢并没有为您见面。那基本上来讲的话，我们应该知道说在台湾的话，他们应该会比中国更愿意跟这个维权人士来见面的。为什么是这样子？
我觉得当然我去台湾主要是冲着台湾的人民去的。这个台湾政府是不是出来见面，我觉得可能不是那么重要吧。我个人觉得，包括我们现在对中国国内的一些注意力呢，也应该转移到民众身上来，而不是随着当权者的指挥棒在转。这是一个关注重点的转移，这个非常重要。当然，我也觉得台湾政府之所以这样做呢，那跟对岸可能也是分不开的。当然，我也接到一些信息呢，中共在威胁很多人跟我见面，甚至设法阻止我去台湾，这个我觉得都是可以理解的。总的一句话，专制的存在对我们的自由随时都有威胁，大家一定要意识到这一点。如果意识不到这一点，可能就要没有远虑，必有近忧了。
The reason for me to visit Taiwan was to meet with the Taiwanese people. So whether the Taiwanese government received me is not very important. And also I think that is something that we have to shift the focus on as well. That we have to focus on the Chinese people, not what the Chinese government does. We have to see what the Chinese people do. And of course, that for the Taiwanese government to take that stance, I think must be an influence of the cross strait as well. On the other side of the cross strait, I also heard from other people that the Communist Party also threatened people not to meet me, and then what I'm trying to say is this, that as long as the totalitarian state exists, that will threaten all of us.
Let's see, we've got the microphone here. We go right to the center table, the woman in the blue shirt.
Mr. Chen, welcome back to DC again. My name is Nadia Chao with the Liberty Times from Taiwan as well. My question is that, based on my personal experience and many observers from the U.S. expert, the young generation in China actually, a lot of them no longer remember Tiananmen or don't even care. Many of them actually believe in the version of the Chinese government that never happened, or it's attacked by the people to, attack on the POA military. So many people feel very surprised that this kind of brainwash works so well in a younger generation. So from your point of view, why this is happening? And do you believe there's a chance, they will change, the view will change, or Chinese people actually still care about it?
您好，我是台湾自由时报来的。这个我想要请教您这个问题就是呢，我们现在听说很多呢，在中国的这些年轻的一代的话呢，他们很多人呢不知道天安门事件， 而且也不记得天安门事件，他们根本是听从政府的这种宣传，天安门，要不然就是天安门从来没有发生过啦，或者是说，那当时呢是因为呢，受到这人民解放军呢之所以会攻击，是因为人民先攻击的，先展开攻击的。那为什么会发生这样一个情况呢？你觉得呢？人们呢会再重新的在他们的记忆里面重新记得这天安门这件事情吗？
其实我觉得每一年咱们外界的悼念啊，都会让中国很多百姓重新想起并且讨论这件事情。其实，在老百姓当中，他们还是经常在私下里谈到这件事情，而且呢，也非常的肯定当年这场6四的这个民主运动，在老百姓心中，是非对错是非常非常清楚的。他们从来没有觉得学生当时和民众的这种民主要求是错误的，他们只是用这个来解释呢，就是说，在一个不讲理的政权之下，你有理恐怕也没有地方讲。那么89就是一个例子，大家往往会把这个呢来作为一个反的例证来引用啊，这对中国就是说相信有理走遍天下的这个传统观念的冲击也是非常非常大的，所以也就造成了这20多年来中国的道德沦丧、世风日下啊，这个权力这个膨胀没数了，贪污腐败盛行，从那个时候是一个非常大的转折点。那个时候中共政权就用这个枪声告诉所有的官员，你尽管贪，我们会保护你啊，也让枪声告诉老百姓，别指望给我们讲理，我们就是要打破枪杆子，你不认同我的领导，我就要杀你。其实这个也写在中学的政治课本里啊，不拥护共产党的领导就是他敌人，他写得非常清楚。
I think that whenever we remember that incident overseas, we also refresh the memory of people in China. Ordinary people in China, they talk about this incident and in private, and they do approve the demand that this was a democratic movement, and they know very well what's right and what's wrong, and they do approve the demand of the students. But they also learn that in an unreasonable regime, you cannot reason with this kind of regime. And 1989, June 4th, 1989, is exactly that case. So in China, that we have a saying is that if you have reasons, you can take all your reasons and to everywhere. You can reason with people and get to your point. But that doesn't work in this regime anymore. So that is why from then on, our morality in China deteriorates. That's why we have so many of the corruption cases. And at the time in 1989, the government used the guns to tell those officials that we will protect you with the guns. And they tell our people that we will fight you with our guns. And that you have to be with us. And so this is actually it also stated in the middle school textbook as well. If you don't support our government, you don't support our Communist Party, then you're against us.
Who's next? Looks like we've come to the end of our session. Well, before we do, I do want to turn to the head of Asia Studies at AEI, Dan Blumenthal.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chen, I have a question for you, which is, do you think it's been the policy of many presidents of the United States to try and convince the Chinese Communist Party to be more respectful of human rights in China? It's been the policy of the presidents to say the Chinese will understand that they need to be more respectful of human rights in order to keep growing economically and be respected in the world. Do you think that that policy has any merit to it? Is the Chinese Communist Party ever going to be convinced to be more respectful of human rights?
这位是这一个美国企业研究所的。 研究员。我的问题是这样子，在美国的历届总统里面呢，都有一个政策，这个政策呢就是希望要试图说服呢中共的话呢对人权上面的尊重，那希望呢能够借由这种说服的这种方式呢，让中共能够来尊重人权，了解尊重人权是非常重要的，而且呢唯有尊重人权，你才能有经济上面的发展，才能在世界上得到其他国家的这个尊重。您认为呢？这样子的像试图要说服了中共的话呢，是很有效的一个方法吗？
我认为这是与虎谋皮呀。很显然，中共的党权，也就是说他们现有的特权，跟人民的人权是相矛盾的。他们就是要靠维护他们的专权、党特权，来侵犯人民的人权，这是很自然的啊。他既然有特权呢，人民的中国就谈不上平等，那就谈不上公民权利。那么这个跟他们说这个，其实中共并不是不清楚，尊重人权，建立起制衡的社会，是最有利于这个国家和社会和人民的一种制度。他对此非常非常的清楚，但是这样一个制度是不利于独裁统治的，对于独裁的滥用权力是有非常非常大的限制的。他对此非常清楚，所以不愿意放弃这种特权。那你就跟他去讲这个，我觉得是没有用的。他目的很清楚，就是要维护专权，就是要把人民视为他的私有物，把整个国家视为他党产，他的现在所有的花销、党的这些费用全部都来自国库。你说他哪一分钱是用他的党费？他即使开全国党代会，他是用党费吗？所以在中国现在是党国不分，他拿着国家这个概念来当幌子来欺骗人民，实际上就是把整个国家据为己有，把公权力据为己有。所以跟他讲这个没用，讲这个也可以，只有到中国建立起民主架构就可以了。
I think if you're trying to do it by doing this way, is pretty much like taking side with the evildoers, and because they don't care about human rights, they only care about their privileges. So if you are trying to, it's impossible to convince them, and it's very clear that the Chinese Communist Party, they do know they need to respect human rights and need to build a society that is with a check and balance. But the thing is that if they build this kind of a society or they respect human rights, it's not going to be beneficial to the dictatorship control. And then they want to treat people as their property. They want to treat the properties of the country as the properties of the parties. And even whenever they hold party plenums, they use the money of the country. It's not the party money, the money from the party. So they taking the country as its own party. They think the country belongs to the party. And there's no way that you convince them with that idea. But the only way is that when China is a democratic country, then maybe you can convince me of that.
这个中共在现在就是利用他的特务来绑架中国的维权人士的时候，他事先就把车牌摘掉，偷偷的在公路上到处跑。你说他不知道这是违法吗？那他不知道这是被别人看见是见不得人的事情吗？他很清楚，但是他还是这样做。还有一个法学家统计，根据最高人民法院说，中国人的这个犯罪状况，普通百姓1/4，中共干部1/1，公检法司这些司法部门的官员，这些人他的犯罪率是1.5%，可见越懂法的这帮人，他犯罪率越高。这说明什么？知法犯法。这样的一个专制制度就滋生这样的人。
That whenever the public security officials wanted to arrest those activists, you know what they do? They take down the license plate of their car. They know that's illegal. They shouldn't do that, but they still do it. So they can go ahead and arrest those activists. And according to statistics released by the Supreme People's Court, that among the ordinary people, 1 out of 400 will commit a crime. And among the officials, government officials, 1 out of 200 will commit crimes. But among those legal experts or the people who in the judiciary, 1.5 people out of 100 people will commit the crime. So you can see that, how prevalent that it is.
我记得我在家被软禁的时候，有国际记者在北京外交部问他们我被软禁的情况，这个 中共外交部就无耻地说啊，陈光诚是自由的。这里我不知道有没有中共外交部的人员，我真是自由的吗？你真的不知道我在被加倍软禁吗？岂有此理！
When I was house arrested, and there was a reporters, foreign reporters asked the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and about my being house arrested, and the people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they said, no, he's free. He can do everything. He's free. I mean, it's ridiculous. I was house arrested. How could I be free?
Right here.
Bill Tucker. I've done a lot of work in Taiwan and China, and I'd like to hear your comments on this one-child policy and how that will affect the economy of the country, because there are going to be less people entering the workforce and having to support the older population who haven't properly prepared for their retirement. And what effect is that going to have on the economy?
我的名字叫 Bill Tiger， 我做了很多有关于呢在台湾呢，还有在这个中国的这样的一些的议题的话，我都很关注。那我今天想问您的问题呢，是有关于呢中国的这个一胎化政策，它是怎么样的影响到了经济的发展的一个情况？因为我们知道这一胎化的政策的话呢，现在会使得劳动人口呢减少，同时呢会使得这个老龄化的这个社会的话呢，他们现在已经面临退休的年龄的话，就没办法有得到这支持。所以呢，我想知道呢，这个一胎化的这个政策呢，对于经济上面的影响。
实际上现在这种影响逐步的都显现出来了。其实你观察得很仔细，这一系列的问题在中国确实已经是非常严重了。所以说中共对此呢还没有完全意识到，或者说死不改悔，他从来就没承认过错误，而且公开的呢在这个9号文件当中写出了7不讲啊，其中就有一个说是不讲党的历史性错误，那就说他从来没错啊。所以我觉得这个一胎化政策实际上本来是一个倡议，但后来就变成了中共的一个任意拘押，甚至是屠杀人民的一个手段啊。中国有句话在这方面就说宁可血流成河，绝不放掉一个啊，宁添10座坟，不增一个人。这一系列的口号就说明这里背后有多么的血腥。
The impact is great. It's very great. Have a great impact on the economy. But the thing is that people have already seen it, but the government still does not admit its mistakes. And that you can see that from the document number 9 document, that one of them is that the government will not admit its historical mistakes. And that this one-child policy was supposed to be initiative to begin with, but now they have used as a measure to abuse people. This one-child policy, and in the Chinese saying that they rather have a bloodshed instead of leaving one person behind. They rather have killed all of them, but just not to leave one person.
Right back here.
The Tiananmen Square protests arose out of.
Can you have your name first, please?
Sorry, Diana Bai. I'm a graduate at Johns Hopkins SAIS. The Tiananmen Square protests arose out of a student movement 25 years ago. If a democratic movement were to arise in China again, do you think there's a particular segment of society that it will come from?
Could you repeat the second half of the question, please?
Can you repeat the second half just a little bit louder?
Yeah.
Thanks.
If there were a new democratic movement to arise in China, is there a particular segment of society that you think it would likely arise from?
那25年前发生了这个天安门事件，现在呢，今天的话呢，这个如果呢，假使呢要有一个新的民主运动的话，如果在有一个民主运动的话要展开的话呢，你觉得是从社会的哪一个角落来的？
我觉得是从社会的各个角落来的。现在意识到这种专制对社会、对个人、对家庭的危害的人数，已经是大大的超出了大家的想象。
I think it will come from all segments of the society, and because there are more and more people realize the threat that is to the society, to individuals, and to families. I think it is beyond your imagination. How many people realize that now?
Right here in the back.
Hi, I'm Henry. I'm a student at Boston University. And I do agree that there are a lot of dissidents in the society right now. But from my upbringing in China, I have noticed that the majority of the people, their concerns primarily aren't about human rights, but it's about accumulating personal wealth. And it's not really concerning. The Communist Party isn't really their primary concern. What's your opinion about this?
我是从波士顿大学来的，是这样子。我觉得，我觉得好像在中国的话，情况现在的话呢，大家反而比较关心的是有关于呢个人的这个财富的累积，而不是对于人权方面的。
个人财富的累积，我觉得个人财富的累积，我的理解是大家关心的还是这个贪污问题。从89年那个时候的关岛啊、腐败啊。每个人可能几万、几十万的就是大数字了。我们看到在25年以后呢，现在就说，从这是中共的大贪当中查出来的，那么是几千万、上亿的，那都不是什么新鲜事儿了啊。这个拥有170多套房的这种干部也不在少数。那么当然，这个还是中共已经公布出来的，没有公布出来的究竟多少，没人知道。所以说，从几万、几十万到现在的几亿甚至更多，那我想大家可以可见一斑了。这已经大家去关心这个贪污的数字，关心这种财产的过度向极少数人的积累，我想这个是非常正常的。
I think when you're talking about the accumulation of the individual wealth, I think this is more about the corruptions. That many years ago, that for those people who have like a few $100,000, we consider that the renminbi that we consider is very rich. But nowadays, look at those corrupted officials. Some of them have even more than 170 houses or apartment units, housing units, and some of them that is like having the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, and those are their wealth.
Right here.
Yang Ming, VOA. June 4th has always been a taboo in China ever since the 25 years ago when the Tiananmen incident happened. And at that time, the pro-reform leaders like Zhao Ziyang were ousted because he supported the student movement. My question is that after 25 years, do you think, is there still any political soil in China, especially in the leadership? Any people that could trigger a political reform? Of course, Xi Jinping said that they are, trying to, what should I say, remedy some mistakes, like anti-corruption. They've been doing all this in order to, to show the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. So, is there any political soil? If there is it coming from the top or from the people, like ordinary people? And just now you also mentioned about the outside help. You call for the help from, like people in the U.S. to help the Chinese people who have been detained, arrested for all these kind of activities. What do you think of that? Do you want me to say that in Chinese also? Okay. 我是美国之音的。那么你刚才提到了6·4呢，实际上一直是中国的一个经济。那么尤其是在这个25年前，那么发生6·4事件之后呢，那么6·4在中国是一直不能谈论的。那么这25年过后呢，当然尤其在这一段时间6·4呢之前，一些个异议人士、活动人士，那么被旅游、被关押，或者是说呢，像许志勇等等这一些个人那你觉得现在目前在中国政府内部里面呢，有没有这个政治改革的力量？因为当年呢，胡耀邦和这个赵紫阳，他们是一些个被认为是中共内部的一些个改革的力量，是吧？拥护改革的，或者说呢，也准备向政治改革那方面去走的一些个力量。 那么现在有没有？那么我们这个你刚才也提到了，那么希望能够国际上能够支持中国的一些改革力量，你对这事情怎么看？谢谢。
我觉得呢，任何一个集团，它都不会是铁板一块，它的肯定每个人的思想差距都是很大的。我也相信，相对而言，中共当中也有一些开明的一些人士，不能说他们的思想都完全一致的保守。但是我觉得，即使是这些开明人士，他现在如果说他就把这个目标定在让中国的民主化、让中共放弃权力的这个标准上，我觉得离大家的期待可能还是很远的。
I think that for any group, it's not within any group, everybody have a different kind of ideas. And same as in China as well, in CCP, they also have different ideas. But they are people who possess of the liberal thinking within the party. But now if you ask them to give up the power of the Communist Party and seek for democracy, this is not going to happen.
Right here in the back, please.
Hi, my name is Sunny. I'm from the U.S. Asia Institute, and I just wanted to know what you would respond to the CPP's stance about the West advocating for China to uphold certain standards of human rights as a form of Western imperialism.
Can the question be repeated, please?
Can you, we didn't quite get the last word. Pluralism?
Imperialism.
Imperialism. So why don't you just give the short version of the question one more time, just to make sure that we've got it up here.
So what would be your response to what human rights as a form of Western imperialism in China specifically? Does that make sense?
Do you understand?
有人说呢，人权的话呢，这个人权的话呢，是西方的帝国主义，是这样子吗？是地方的帝国主义的话，您有什么反应呢？
我也很奇怪啊，西方这个像美国吧，它没有皇帝，怎么会成为帝国主义呢？
I'm really confused too, because there is no emperor in the United States. How can it be imperialism?
我也在想呢，之所以说西方的，我觉得可能就是因为这种先进的制度率先在西方实现了而已，这个是民主制度，它只是人类社会发展的一个更进一步、更文明的、更科学的一种社会制度而已。因为它率先在西方实现了，所以被叫做西方的什么主义。我个人觉得，其实这个是一个误解。
I think it is only because in the Western society there is a more advanced systems. Democratic systems, especially, it's just more civilized and more scientific. It's a system that is more civilized and more scientific, and it just happened to be in the West. And so a lot of people can link them to the Westernism. So that is why. But I think this is misconception.
其实现在中国也正走着西方的路啊，只不过是政治上他不走，只选择有利于他的走而已啊。那反过来讲，当年的马克思是哪里的？马克思不会是住在东海里的吧？也是西方的，那他为什么要学呢？
But in fact, actually, China is following the path of the West as well, except that it's not following the path. You only follow the path that you want to take, you want to follow. It's not others, not the political reform things. But think about it. Marxism is from the West. Why did they follow it? It was from the West as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our time today, and I want to make one final comment. Many of you are familiar with what we do here at AEI. It's always important to all of us at AEI that we remind you about the why of our organization as opposed to just the what of these types of programs. We were established 76 years ago on the principles that have been articulated today by Mr. Chen. We believe that expanding human liberty is the only way to give the most people the best life. That free enterprise should be a part of a broad spectrum of human rights that don't stop at the water's edge. We believe that what is good for Americans is good for the people all over the world. This is not an imperialistic idea. This is an idea of global brotherhood. As the Dalai Lama reminded us this last February, each of us is 1 in 7 billion. and each of us has a moral responsibility to look out for the freedom and the growing human prosperity in every conceivable way of each one of our brothers and sisters around the world. Where there's tyranny, all of us has a moral responsibility. We've heard here today from Mr. Chen what that means and what each one of us can do. I urge each one of us to reflect on what we've heard here today and to remember the lessons of Tiananmen. These things can and will be repeated unless each one of us struggles and remembers our moral responsibilities as a human being and as part of the system of global brotherhood. I'm deeply grateful to all of you for coming and sharing this time with us today, and I have a few other thank yous as well. Our friends at the Witherspoon Institute in Princeton have made this possible in this collaboration, and I'm delighted to see them here and looking forward to doing more work with them in the future. Mr. Chen's wife, Yuan Weijing, joins us today and is responsible for helping to get Mr. Chen here with us. Join me in thanking and congratulating our wonderful translator, Ruby Huang. And most of all, for the incredible honor that we have gotten today, all of us here in the audience and here at AEI, we're especially grateful for the courage and the ongoing wonderful work of Mr. Chen Guangcheng.
谢谢，谢谢。